إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له وما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وبعد. Begin by praising Allah. We praise Him, we seek His help, and we ask for His forgiveness. And we take refuge with Allah from the evil of ourselves and from the evil consequence of our evil actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can misguide. And whomsoever Allah leaves to go astray, no one can guide. And I testify that Allah alone is worthy of worship and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the last and final messenger. I've been asked to today talk about Islam, the true religion. And so what I want to talk about is how can we in fact know that Islam is the true religion? And before we can even talk therefore about the subject of how can we know Islam is the true religion, it might be worth spending a bit of time discussing the issue of how can we know something? How can you know something? That's a good question, right? How do we know that what's happening today is real? How do you know that we're not all plugged into a computer like in the Matrix? And this is all an illusion. That someone's going to come and do some amazing kung fu. No, but seriously, how do we actually know? How do I know this is not a dream? Well, you don't. You can never be absolutely sure. But there are some reasons, and there are a lot of good reasons why you might think that that's not the case. Apart from anything else, what I want to dwell upon is what faculty do you use in order to make sense of the world around you? Well, let's put it this way. If a man... Do you have gas meters here in Norway? Do you have gas when you cook? You have gas? You don't cook with gas? I thought in Norway you had lots of natural gas and stuff like that. It goes to Britain. Yeah. Okay, so you all cook with electricity then? You have an electricity meter. You get free electricity. Oh, okay. So you have a meter, right? Do you have a meter? And does some guy come and read the electricity meter? So how do you know how much you're using? They just send it. You use this much electricity. No proof, no evidence, no nothing. It's going to be easy to convince you guys then. In England, okay, we have gas meters, electricity meters, and water meters. You can see it there, how much you are using and how much you are consuming. And a guy comes around and he knocks on your door, okay, and he says, I've come to read the gas meter. All right? That's how it happens in England. Norway is strange. I don't know, maybe you just trust people a lot. That's good. Okay? So here's a question. Right? Here's a question. If some guy comes knocking on your door, imagine you have electricity meters. Yeah? Can you imagine that? Yeah? Alhamdulillah. Right? Thanks be to God. And some guy comes knocking on your door dressed in nothing except a pair of red underpants. Yeah, you don't have to imagine that if you don't want to, okay? And he comes knocking on the door and he says, I've come to read the gas meter. What's your reaction to that going to be? What are you going to say, seriously? What are you going to say to this guy? Huh? In Norway, probably nothing. He'd probably say, oh, welcome. I don't know. I mean, we just give you the money. We don't even, just tell us how much I've used and I'll pay you, Right? Seriously, what are you going to say? Okay. What did you say? Okay. Because this is a challenge. Someone is coming to your house and he's making a claim. He's making a claim on you, on your money, on your wealth. Right? And so, as the brother said, he said, ask for some ID. Because usually when someone comes to read the meter or something like that, you expect him to wear a certain uniform. He will. In UK, they will come with a certain uniform, British Gas, London Electricity, yeah? And he has a little computer, where he puts the data in. And he has some ID. Okay. What is that process that we are using in order to make sense of what is going on? Here is this guy. He's making a claim. What process are we using to determine whether we should accept his claim or not? What process are we using? What are we doing? Yeah? Proving involves what? Huh? It involves logic, reason. You use logic and reason and common sense. Yes? True or not? You accept that? Do you accept that generally in our life, human beings, we see the world around us, we see it, we hear it, we feel it, yeah, we taste it, we experience it through our senses, and that information that comes to us, we process that through our brain. And we call that process reasoning. Yes? True or not? Okay. So let's use this process of reasoning and of common sense in order to understand the world around us. Now there are some principles that we could call universal principles. There are some things that human beings everywhere, they accept to be true. They're truisms, universals, and it's something we call common sense. Common because it's common. Everybody accepts these things. I'll give you an example. Would we all accept that part of something is less than the whole of a thing? Part of something is less than the whole. Yes? There you go. Yeah? Common sense. Okay. Would we also accept, generally from our human experience, you don't see something coming from nothing? True or not? Yeah? Except in Norway, when you get your electricity. But no, you don't find something coming from nothing, right? Do you find order spontaneously arising out of chaos? Do we find that? No. Our human experience, in our human experience, we don't find that. Where we see order, where we see patterns, where we see laws, our human experience, our reason, our common sense tells us that someone or something has imposed those laws, made those systems, made those forms through which and by which things function. So let's look at our world and let's look at our universe and let's look at everything around us and apply these simple, basic, reasonable assumptions to try and make sense of the world around us. Well, when we do that, we see that also in our human life, in the world around us, in the universe, we find laws. We find order. We find things existing according to patterns. We find form. We find systems. We find order. Therefore, it's only reasonable as a human being to presume that an ordered, systemized universe, that this order and this systemization and these forms did not come from nothing, nor did they spontaneously arise out of chaos. Because there is very little, if anything, in human experience that would make that a reasonable assumption. Rather, it's reasonable to assume, where we see things working according to laws and according to patterns, that someone or something with intelligence, something with power, something with will, has imposed those laws and those patterns and those orders upon that thing. That's why, if I was walking in the desert, excuse me, is that you got a mobile phone there? Have you got a mobile phone? Can I borrow it, please? Thanks. I don't need to use it yet. Okay? See, I was walking along, and you know this is not true, but anyway, I was walking along. Does anyone know what this mobile phone is made of, right? Two basic components, three. It's got plastic, it's got glass, it's got a silicon chip, right? And it's got a few precious metals. But mostly, its major components are plastic, yeah, and glass and silicon. Okay, where does plastic come from? Does anyone know what plastic is from? Oil, thank you. And glass and silicon? Sand, good. Tell me the name of a place with lots of oil and sand. Saudi Arabia. So there I was, walking along in Saudi Arabia, and there in the middle of the desert, I found this mobile phone, a product of billions and billions of years of random events. Yeah? The oil bubbled, the earth moved, the wind blew, the sand shifted, the sun shone, the lightning struck, the rain fell, the wind blew a bit more, the camel trod, and after billions of years, this mobile phone formed itself by a process of random events. I turn it on, hi mum! I'm asking you a simple question. Is that reasonable to make a claim like that? It's more crazy than the guy with the red underpants asking to read your electricity meter, right? That's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable claim. That's not a reasonable assumption to come to. Yet, that's exactly what we are being asked to believe by some people. Some people are claiming that our universe, that our solar system, that the life that exists in this planet is a product of random events. A big explosion leading to ordered, systemized forms of existence. And by the way, the most primitive life form is much more complex than this mobile phone. Much more complex than this mobile phone. But the reality is, what we find when we look at the world around us and we think about it, look at the alternation of the night and the day. Think about it. What if the earth was spinning? Okay, the earth spins on its axis once every 24 hours. What if the earth was spinning really, 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 really slowly? Imagine a day, right, was 30 years long. And a night is 30 years long. So the sun is shining on one part of the earth for 30 years. The other is in darkness for 30 years. What's going to happen? One part of the earth's surface will be superheated, the other will become super cooled. Very hard to imagine how life would exist. We just happen to have the right composition of gases in the atmosphere, of oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. This balance is essential for life to exist. Ozone. We have a layer of gas called ozone that just happens to filter out the harmful effects of the sun's radiation. If the ozone layer, by the way, was too thick, it would have a detrimental effect. If it was too thin, then the radiation would exterminate life on the earth. The crust of the earth's surface happens to be just of the right consistency for life in order to be able to exist. If it was too thick, it would be a problem. If it was too thin, it would also be a problem. The distance of the earth from the sun The same thing about being too hot or too cold. In cosmological terms, in terms of the whole size of the whole universe, you can see how finely tuned this planet is for the existence of life. And that doesn't only apply to our planet. In fact, it applies to the very conditions that brought this universe into existence in the first place. The nature of gravity, the force of gravity, if it was much stronger, I mean, stronger by something like 1/1,000,000,000 of a percentage. I mean, a huge, tiny amount. If gravity had been stronger, then the universe would not have expanded. If it had been weaker, then the same. Either if it had been weaker, it would have just gone on and expanded too fast, and stars and galaxies would not have formed. If it had been too strong, then the universe would never have expanded. This is just some of the fine-tuning that we see in this universe, the laws through which and by which the universe exists and life is allowed to exist. And we could mention many, many more. For example, the stronger and weaker electromagnetic force and other things. The point is, some of these things, of course, are speculation, some of them are theory, but what does it show is that we live in an ordered, systemized universe. What is there? Why is it reasonable to assume anything except that this universe must have been brought into existence by a power and intelligence? Now, many atheists, they will say, well, the only thing they can't deny this fact. They can't. So what do they say? They say things like, well, okay, if the universe has a creator, then who created the creator? Okay, so if that's your argument, can we just take a step back and say, are you admitting, at least, therefore, the universe needs a creator? Are you agreeing to that? Are you saying design compels us to believe in the existence of a designer? Okay, if you agree with that, let's go from there. There is a very logical and reasonable assumption to make. The nature, and this is very important, the nature of the intelligence and the power that has brought the universe into existence, the nature of it must be different from the universe itself. Why? Simple. If the nature of this force, this power, whatever, we're not going to give it a name yet, is the same as the universe, then in fact, if you think about it, all you have is more universe. If the nature is the same, then it is the same. Then all you have is more of the same. Right? And that's a problem. Because you'll say, well, if the nature is the same, if the nature of this intelligent force is the same, then you will ask, well, who created or what created that? And if that is not different, you'll say, who created or what created that? And if that is not different, and you can imagine, you go on and on, you have this idea of a creator creating a creator creating a creator forever, which is a problem. And I'll tell you why it's a problem. Simple analogy. Imagine there is a sniper. He has his target in sight. He radios back to the HQ. I've got my target in sight. HQ says, wait a minute, I have to check higher up. And higher up says, wait a sec, I have to check higher up. And higher up says, wait a sec, I have to check higher up. Yeah? So if they keep saying, what's this guy? Is he ever going to fire the gun? No. There has to be somewhere where it stops, right? There has to be a place where it's higher up and there is no more higher up. Or else the trigger will never be pulled. It's the same thing. If you have a creator creating a creator, creating creators, creating creators, creating creators, you never get anything created. You never get any creation. But here we are. It's right here. That's why it's logical, rational to presume, common sense, that the nature of the creator must be different from the creation. So if the creation is temporary, the creator must be eternal. If the creation is finite, the creator must be infinite. If the creation is limited by space and time, the creator must be unlimited by space and time. If the creation is needy, the creator must be self-sufficient. Now tell me reasonably and logically, how can you have two infinite, eternal, self-sufficient beings that are unconfined by space and time? You can't. It doesn't make any logical sense. There could only be one such being. All of this just goes to show that how we can rationally come to an understanding. What is the most rational explanation for our universe? Is it must have a creator who is one, who is infinite, who is eternal and self-sufficient, and who is not like anything in the creation. I introduce all of this simply. Why? Because that is the first thing I offer as ID. The first thing I offer to show that Islam is the true religion is what Islam teaches about God. Because Islam is the only religion, except Judaism, but it is the only religion that teaches such a concept of God without confusing and compromising this concept. Christianity, for example, has a similar concept, but then Christianity tells us that Jesus is God. What does that mean? The whole way that, because we agree that the nature of God must be different from the creation. Did Jesus eat food? Yes. Did he breathe air? Yes. Was he born? Yes. According to Christians, he's going to die. He did die, right? And even Muslims, we believe he will die. Yeah? So that means he's needy, he's mortal, he's temporary. He was confined by space and time. So that means Jesus is like the creation. He's part of the creation. So by definition, how do we even know there's a God? We ask the Christian. Well, they will give the same arguments that we gave. So what do you mean then? How can something be temporary and eternal? Mortal and immortal? Needy and not needy? At the same time? It's impossible. Doesn't make any sense. So any religion that tells us that a man is God, or that God became a man, or that God is everywhere in everything. I am God, you are God, the tree is God, the sun is God, the moon is God, everything in the creation is God. I say, what's the proof? Where's your evidence? Bring me evidence to support your claim. Give me a reasoned argument why we should believe that. Otherwise, old man in the red underpants, go away, you ain't coming in my house. All right? Where's your evidence? But human beings were left with many questions. The many questions we have are, for example, why is there so much suffering on earth? You heard that one before, right? Why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much pain? If there's a God, how come babies die and there's disease and earthquakes and volcanoes and men in red underpants coming to read the gas meter? I shouldn't put the things together, right? But seriously, why is there so much suffering in the world? Why? Think about this. Is this a logical argument or is it an emotional argument? Because if you think about it, the issue of why is there suffering actually has got nothing to do with the question of whether the universe has a creator or not. The universe having a creator is logically consistent. It's a rational explanation for an organized universe. Why there is suffering is a different question. The only issue here is, why does this creator let suffering happen? It has nothing to do as to whether God exists or not. It's a question as to why does God let these things happen? Why? And then the big one. What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? What is life for? What is the reason for my existence? How can we know the answer to this question? How can we know? And then the other question, what's going to happen when I die? Is there life after death? Is there life after death? What will happen to me when I die? How do I know the answer to these questions? You see, my brothers and sisters, behind this curtain over here, there is a room. And in that room, there is a door. Can anyone tell me what is behind that door in that room? Who can tell me? Come on, hands up. Who can tell me what's behind that door in that room? You know? Do you know? Do you know? What? How do you know? How do you know? How can you see? You can't see. It's over there. How can you see with your eyes? In fact, you're wrong, by the way. You're actually wrong. So what you said is wrong. You can't see it with your eyes. So can anyone tell me? What? Yeah, but I'm asking you, can you tell me what's in that room? Yes or no? No. Okay, the point here, my brothers and sisters, is to illustrate a very important point. This is the limit of reason. You can think, well, maybe this, maybe that. It could be this, it could be that. Maybe through some thinking and something you could come to an understanding. But this is what is called ilmul ghaib. It's knowledge of it's unseen. What is the purpose of life? It's the same thing. Is there life after death? When we die, is something going to happen to us? It's the same thing. You can't see that. You can't perceive it. So this is the unseen. The point being here is that how can I know? I want to know. I think everyone wants to know this, whether they admit it or not. Everyone asks this question. What's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What's it all for? Is there life after death? Why is there suffering in the world? Why? Why? What are the answers to these questions? Now really the only way we can reach certainty, about the answers to these questions is when the one who created this universe, this God, this one infinite, eternal, self-sufficient being who created this universe, brought it into existence, created us, if He tells us, this is the reason for which I exist, for which you exist, this is the reason, this is what is going to happen when you die, okay, then we can reach some certainty. Then we can reach some type of complete and comprehensive understanding. But then there's another question. How do I know? How do I know something is from God? How can I know that this information is from God? We go back to our hidden room. Right? Let's give an example. This hidden room. Now if I tell you, okay, I can tell you what's in that room, you say how? It's similar to the man in the red underpants, right? I'm telling you I know what's in this room. You say, how do you know? You say, well, I work here. How do I know you work here? Well, here's my ID. Right? Here's my ID. I'm the engineer. And I know every single nook and cranny. And I can tell you, well, you know this, and I can tell you that, and I can tell you so many, and I can give you more and more things until you will say, yes, now I believe you. Right? And so I tell you, okay, what is behind that door is... You don't really want to know, right? There's two doors actually. One's the toilet and the other's the exit, as the brother said. But, so And there might be another door as well. But the point being is, forget the details. The point being is that I need to give you some information to convince you. So the point being here is something that is from God. Something that is from the all-knowing, all-wise, all-seeing, all-hearing creator of the heavens and the earth. And we're presuming some things about God. I know that may not logically or be logically necessary. But we would expect some information that is from the Creator. We would expect some certain things from that Creator. We would expect some ID. We would expect some qualities. No, so let's first of all look at what Islam says. Islam is saying, actually, before we look at Islam, let's look. We've got a group of guys standing. Okay? Let's not imagine there's not one. Now here's the real situation you have in this life. You have 4 or 5 guys. One guy is saying, there is no door. There is no room. And how did you come to be here in this auditorium? It's just chance and coincidence. This whole place just put itself together by random events, and you're here by random event, and don't worry about it. Just have a good time and enjoy your life. Right? So that's obviously the atheist. Right? The materialist. Then another one is saying, well, what you do is when you go through the door, you go out and then you come back in and you sit here for a bit and you go through the door and you go out and you come back in, right? This is reincarnation, you know. It's the idea. But they're saying something as well. You need to be a good person. You know, if you want to keep coming back and, you know, eventually, of course, if you are a good person, you'll go to a better place than this one. You'll be better. So there are other ideas, ideas of reincarnation. And then of course we have Judaism. They say, okay, there is a door and it leads to a really nice, beautiful place. And there's also a terrible punishment waiting for you, and God is going to judge you. Who made this place is going to judge you. But you know what? You can only get to that nice place if you are already born into the Jewish race. Right? You have to be born a Jew to get there. This is, by the way, actually what a friend of mine went to the chief rabbi in England and asked him, if you're a non-Jew, how can you get to paradise? He said, you can't. There's no hope for you. Right? So it may be true, right? It might be. I mean, you know, just because I don't like it, it doesn't mean it's not true, right? But it's a bit helpless for the rest of us, right? And we still want to ask the question, well, why should I believe you? You know, why did God put me here? Why am I here? Why then? Okay? The Christian will tell you something different, of course. And we have Islam. But at least 3 of these religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, have a very similar story. They are saying that God, the Creator, this Creator, has revealed a message. He has chosen certain human beings. And He has chosen these human beings because of some reasons. He chose them because they're truthful, honest, trustworthy, and sincere. It's very important. And God chose them to be the ones to whom He gave the message. And that message from God is for all the human beings. And also these messengers, these prophets, these people who God has chosen, they're not only delivering the message, they also live the message. So they are practical examples of how to follow this message from God. If you believe in God and you thank God and praise God and worship God and you follow this guidance, which includes many things we will talk about very briefly, then you will go to paradise. There will be a day of judgment. God will question you about all you have done. If you believe in God and you do righteous deeds, you'll go to paradise. If not, you will go to hell. Three religions pretty much say very, very similar things. But still, we want to know, how do we know? How can we decide? Well, certainly, when we look at the prophets, when we look at the messengers, and definitely we can look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the big differences between Islam and Judaism and Christianity and even Buddhism and much of Hinduism is that Islam took place in the whole viewpoint of history. In other words, Islam, what happened, what the Quran says, what happened in the life of the Prophet Muhammad is historical. It's not really shrouded that much in myth and legend. It took place in the full spotlight of history, in a time when human beings had begun in an unprecedented way to write down and collect in a systematic way the experiences that were happening around them. And that is something we don't find even in ancient civilizations. So this is history. Islam is taking place within the view of history. So when we talk about the things the Prophet Muhammad said and the Prophet Muhammad did, actually we're talking about something that is pretty much agreed upon as being historical. Of course there's differences of opinion, but by and large, much of what we have about the life of the Prophet Muhammad is agreed to be historical, in a way that's not true about the life of Moses or the life of Jesus. And there are things that took place in the life of the Prophet Muhammad that would lead a reasonable person to assume that what he was speaking is the truth. So this is the first thing. Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, is believable. He's believable because why? He's proven himself to be truthful. He's proven himself to be trustworthy. He's proven his sincerity. He's proven his honesty. And that is proven in his life. And you can see many, many examples of that. What is very important here to understand, and this is important for Muslims, as well as people who are not yet Muslim, is that you can't judge the Prophet Muhammad or Islam or any religion based upon, oh, I just don't like that. I don't like that law. I don't like that rule. I don't like that punishment. It doesn't sound very nice to me. Yeah? Well, you know, I have a really bad toothache and the dentist needs to give me an injection. The last time, by the way, I went to the dentist, this is a personal thing, you know, the dentist tried to inject me, I nearly bit her finger off, okay, because I'm so terrified of injections, right? But the point being here is that the fact that I don't like it doesn't mean it's not a necessity to have my tooth pulled out. Right? It's illogical. There's no rational basis to say, oh, I don't like your religion because it has some laws that just sound a bit bloody to me, or you know, or maybe they're too soft. Other people may complain, oh, your laws are too soft. You don't just kill everybody for everything. That's what we do. We just, you know, someone steals, kill him. Someone looks at me in a bad way, kill him. You know, in some societies that may be exactly what happens. Right? So if you think about it, that's not the right way to judge. No, let's look at the man. Let's look at the man himself. The man who brought the message. Was he truthful? Was he sincere? Was he trustworthy? How did he behave throughout his life? And with Muhammad we can do that. We can look at his life. I just want to give a couple of incidents because obviously we don't have time to go through the whole of the life of the Prophet. But there's just two incidents I want to mention. Number one, this is very early on in the mission of the Prophet Muhammad. Of course, his mission was to call people to believe in the one Creator who is unlike anything in this universe, that people should not worship the creation, but they should worship the Creator, and that they should follow the guidance that God had given, the Creator had given, through the prophets, and of course through him being the final messenger. So this is his message. Okay. So this is his message. So the people, they are really resisting this. Of course, because the Prophet is saying a whole lot of things that they don't like. He's saying a whole load of things that they don't like. Like, for example, you shouldn't bury your baby daughters alive in the sand, which was one of their customs they used to follow. I mean, not everyone used to do it, but that was one of their customs. This is what Islam was saying. Don't kill your children because you're afraid, how am I going to feed them? And the first ones they killed were girls because they were considered weak and not very valuable. So the Prophet was saying, you shouldn't do that. And the Prophet was also saying that the rich and the strong should not take advantage of and oppress the poor and the weak. Well, the rich and the strong didn't really like that very much. And of course they were in control of the propaganda machinery of the time. It was conflicting with their self-interest. Just rather like the world it is today with the press, as we will perhaps see over the course of this conference. So the Prophet Muhammad was also saying that why are you worshipping idols of stone and wood? Why do you pray to them? Why do you put your faith in them? They didn't like that because they thought that, well, we have these 360 idols in Mecca around the Kaaba, and if we get rid of all these gods, who's going to come to Mecca? And how are we going to make money? Yeah. So they didn't like what he was saying. Doesn't mean that it wasn't true though, does it? So anyway, however, what they did realize is that this message of Islam, or this message that the Prophet Muhammad was bringing, was being accepted by quite a lot of people. And by the way, problematically, most of the early Muslims were women and slaves and poor people. The very people that they were exploiting and oppressing. So they decided to make the Prophet Muhammad an offer. This is the offer they made him. They said, if you want to be our king. Now he was of course from a very, very noble and important family. So they said, if you want to be our king, we'll make you our king. If you want money, we will make you the richest man amongst us. If it's women that you desire, you just tell us which women you want and they will be yours. And if, you are sick, and this spirit that's coming to you and telling you things, we will spend any amount of money until we get a cure for you. Just stop preaching this religion. Now think about it. If you're a con man, if you're a liar, if you're a trickster, what you're going to say, whoa, which offer shall I take now? King, money, women, yeah, that sounds good. Right? Yeah, I think I'll go for the king. Yeah? I mean, do you understand? Everything is offered. Okay? But what does he say? He says in one report, some of the books of Sirah, it very eloquently says that the Prophet replied, if you give me the sun in one hand and you give me the moon in the other hand, I will still not leave off preaching this message. Now, think about it. Is that the words of a liar? Is that the words of a con man? Is that the words even of a deluded person? Because that's what some people say. Well, yeah, he thought he was a prophet of God. He really believed it. Of course, he wasn't a liar. He wasn't really purposefully but he just thought that this angel Gabriel was coming to him and so on and so forth. So he imagined it. But, you know, it's very hard to explain. If the Prophet Muhammad was, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, deluded, how do we explain the information in the Quran? How do we explain the detailed legal injunctions in the Quran? How do we explain, how does a man living in the desert 1,400 years ago, how does he come with a book that describes the lives and the histories of the prophets that came before? How does it describe the laws through which people should live? How, from where even many Christians and Jews, they've realized this problem. And they said, well, even some of the Christians, they said, you know what the extent they went to? They said Muhammad was actually a Christian bishop. A heretic Christian bishop who escaped to Arabia. They had to, because they said it's the only way you can explain all of this knowledge and information. But and there's even more amazing stuff in the Quran. For example, let me just turn to Surah Al-Anbiya, which is the 21st surah. And let's turn to ayah 30. Okay, so Surah Al-Anbiya 21:30. And let's just read this quite remarkable few verses of the Quran. And let's ask this question. From where does this information come? This book is 1,400 years old. Let's remember that. 1,400 years old. Okay? And I'm just going to read the English translation of it. Okay? Have not those who disbelieved known that the heavens and earth were joined together as one united piece, then we parted them, and we made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe? Now, what is remarkable is the Quran is talking about the heavens and the earth being one united piece. Then we parted them. Right? I mean, today we all know. It's, secondary school science, the Big Bang, the common origin of the universe. But how does someone know that 1,400 years ago? Where did someone even get the idea about this 1,400 years ago? Where does this information come? It's amazing, and and there's many things. I just want to turn to the next chapter, amazingly, and that's called Surah Al-Mu'minun, the Surah of the Believers. And if we look at verse 14, this is amazing. It says, the Quran, now the problem is, we really miss a lot out in the English translation, but here it goes, right? It says, we created man out of an extract of clay. This is talking about Adam. And then it says, and the word here is thumma. Thumma doesn't necessarily mean and then next. It means and moreover, and on top of that, or in addition to that. We made him as a nutfa, meaning the man. We made man as a nutfa. A nutfa in Arabic means a small drop. In another verse of the Quran, in Surah Al-Insan, in the second ayah, it mentions nutfa amshaj, which means mixed nutfa, of the male and the female. Nutfa means a small drop. So the human being is created from, it means here it's talking about the sperm. The nutfa is referring to here the sperm. And from the male and the female nutfa. So although it doesn't say the egg, but that's what we know it to be now. A small drop of fluid from the man and from the woman, it says. And then it goes on to say, Then we made this nutfa into an alaq. The word alaq in Arabic has three meanings. It means a clot of blood, it means a thing that clings, and it means a leech-like object. By the way, each of these terms is accurate when it comes to the first stage of human embryonic development. And this, by the way, is microscopic. You can't see this with the naked eye. Yet the Quran 1,400 years ago is describing this stage of human embryonic development as an alaq, which means a leech-like object. And then it says, and then we made out of that a lump of flesh, mudgha, means like a chewed piece of meat. And that's exactly what the next stage of embryonic development looks like. And then we made out of that bones, and then we clothed the bones with flesh. This is amazing, because that's exactly what, from this chewed piece of meat, the bones grow, and then and the word the Quran uses is fa, which also means then, but here it means quickly. Fa in Arabic means then, and it happened quickly after. Not like thumma. Thumma could mean after some time or moreover, but fa means and then quickly. And that's exactly what happens. And again, by the way, this is all happening at a level that cannot be seen with the naked eye. And then we brought forth the human being, and it took this form of the human being. So the Quran is describing 1,400 years ago information that we have only discovered in the last 80, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. Where does information like that come from? Well, isn't that the sort of ID? Isn't that the ID you would expect in a book that is from God? Isn't that the sort of person, truthful and honest and trustworthy, whose word is believed, who shows in his life his truthfulness, his trustworthy and his honesty? And there is many remarkable things about the Quran. Another remarkable thing is the language of the Quran. The Arabs at the time of the Prophet Muhammad were masters of their language. Masters of their language. In fact, they had a marketplace for poetry. They had a marketplace for poems. Yet the Quran challenged these people. If you believe that this book is from anyone other than God, than the Creator, just make one chapter like it. One chapter. You know how big the smallest chapter of the Quran is? 3 lines. 3 lines. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'ataynaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. Inna shaniyaka huwal abtar. That's the smallest chapter of the Quran. Yet these masters, these people who could stand up and recite poems from the top of their head for hours, they could not produce, and they admitted it, they were totally unable to bring anything like the Quran. Because the Quran was not like anything the Arabs had. It wasn't poetry. They know what's poetry, and it wasn't poetry. It wasn't normal speech. It wasn't rhymed prose. It wasn't anything that they had experienced before. Yet, they were Arabic words. The language, they understood it. They understood the words. Yet they could not make anything like it. They knew when they heard this, that this could not be the product of a human being. And there's another thing, a really truly extraordinary thing. And I know a lot of Muslims, you don't think much of this. But it is truly remarkable that this book, the Quran, you can go anywhere in the world. You can go anywhere in the world. Here in Norway, you can go to Timbuktu, you can go to South Africa, you can go to Malaysia, you can go to China, you can go to Siberia, you can go to the US of A, you can go to Chile, and you can find a Quran from all of those different places. In fact, you know what? You can go back 100, 200, 500, 600, you can go back 1,000, 300, 400 years. In fact, we can find manuscripts dated from very, very soon after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And you can compare them with the Quran that we have today. And you know what? You will not find a difference between them in a single letter. There is only one Quran. Yes, the style of writing, the font, if you like, has changed. There have been the vowel marks to help people who are not Arab pronounce the Quran correctly. But the words, the actual words, the same. A book that has not changed for 1,400 years. And another amazing thing. There are kids as young as 4 years old, and many of the age of 7, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Muslims living today and throughout the whole of our history who have memorized this entire book from cover to cover, have memorized it and can recite it from memory. How is that possible? How is that possible? These are the signs. These are the indicators. These are the things that could lead a reasonable, rational, thinking person to look at the Prophet Muhammad, to look at his life, to look at the Quran, and to conclude and to understand that this must really be what it claims to be, the true religion of God. Having said that, what does the religion of Islam teach? It teaches you what? To speak the truth and not lie. To keep your promises and don't break them. When someone trusts you with something, you keep the trust. Be good to your neighbors. Obey your parents and treat them respectfully. Look after the poor and the weak and the needy. Enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. Live chaste, moral, decent lives. That you should pray to God 5 times a day at regular times. You should discipline yourself spiritually. Train your mind to be aware of God. Train your consciousness through prayer, through charity to cure you of stinginess, and through fasting, not eating and drinking in the month of Ramadan from dawn until sunset. Because if you can control your appetites, you can control your eating, your drinking, it proves you can control yourself. You have self-control. You learn patience. And that once in your lifetime, if you can afford it, you should make pilgrimage to Mecca, where you will stand with people of every race, of every color, of every creed. And it doesn't matter whether you're a king, you're a millionaire, whether you're famous or not, whether people think you're beautiful or not. None of that matters, because you're just wearing 2 pieces of cloth. Because God does not look to your outward appearance. God does not look to what car you are driving. God does not look to what house you live in. God does not look to whether you have designer clothes or not. God is looking in your heart to see whether you are sincere, whether you are a person who loves Him and worships Him, whether you are a truthful and honest person or not. That is what is important to God. And that is what you know at Hajj. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, Arab or non-Arab. It makes no difference to God. What is important to God is your piety. Do you fear Him? Do you love Him? Do you obey Him? Have you surrendered yourself and followed the guidance that He has sent down with His final messenger Muhammad? May God's peace and blessings be upon him. These are the ways and the means through which a person who thinks, the person who ponders, the person who reflects can know that Islam truly is the religion that has been revealed by God for the guidance of all of humanity. My brothers and sisters, may Allah guide you, may Allah guide me, all of us, upon the path of truth. May Allah bless all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.